Sure.
Easiest question first, just say and spell your name.
Ned Donovan, Neddonovan.
And what is your rank here at IOP?
Police officer.
I mean, obviously from the jump we can tell you're not from here, so where are you from?
I was born in London, and I've been there for most of my life, but some of my family are from the US and I've always had a connection to America.
When did you start visiting America, or did you ever visit America before you moved here full time?
Yeah, I've been visiting America since I was a child. So every summer, every vacation, my grandmother was from Kentucky. So she ended up spending most of her elderly years in the Northeast, so Cape Cod, places like that. But this is my first sort of place I've lived in the South.
I was going to say, walk me through where you visited. So it sounds like upper Northeast for the most part?
Yeah, so my family have lived in America, sort of across the country. I've got family in Florida, California, New Hampshire, and so no one down here, but I visited pretty much everywhere else.
You hit a lot of the beachy states, though, to say the least.
I think English people, we want to find some good weather. And so Charleston for me has all the things I love about England. You know, history, I can walk everywhere, good food, but the weather is a lot better.
So tell me a little bit about your life back in London. What did you grow up wanting to be in law enforcement? What was your career path like, I guess?
Sure. So I went to school in the UK. I grew up in London. I went to university and dropped out. I was studying archaeology and it wasn't for me. I then went into journalism and worked at quite large newspapers in London. I was then a foreign correspondent for them in India and the Middle East. And then COVID hit and I was stuck in London, and I'd always had an interest in law enforcement, and I applied to join Scotland Yard, the Metropolitan Police, and they took me on, and I did that for about 5 years.
I think as journalists, right, we are ingrained in this culture where you have to interview police a lot, and you have to interview law enforcement a lot. So did that kind of spark your interest, or was it before journalism even?
No, I think you're exactly right. Policing and journalism have quite significant similarities. Talking to people who don't want to talk to you, trying to find things out, knocking on doors and going all sorts of places all times of day, just slightly different end results, and being able to use those transferable skills, but in a publicly fulfilling role was a fantastic move.
What was working in India like?
I lived in Delhi, which is the capital of India. The air quality left something to be desired. The food was fantastic. The people were great. I got to travel around Asia, which was wonderful, and learn a bit more about that part of the world. Certainly different to America and different to London, but I think I'm happier here.
So you've been in the law enforcement sector now, you said about 5 years?
Yeah, so I went to Hendon Police College, which is where the Metropolitan Police send their police officers in 2020. So I joined in the midst of COVID. I spent most of my first few months giving out tickets for breaking COVID regulations and not dealing with much crime. And then I was attached to a response team, which is a patrol team in central London, in a borough of around 170,000 people. And I worked on that for 5 years. Obviously, very dynamic urban environment with everything you can imagine. And that was consistently challenging.
There's obvious differences probably between South Carolina and London, but talk to me a little bit about what it's like there being in law enforcement. What kinds of things are you dealing with there, or is it a lot of the same crimes that we see in America?
I think there's a lot of similar challenges that law enforcement face, and obviously England and America share the same legal background. They share common law. South Carolina in particular has a really connected tradition to English law, and in fact even in the learning I've been doing so far there's a lot of similarities. The biggest difference is obviously police officers in London do not carry firearms by routine. We also are obviously a very large organisation, 32,000 police officers in the Metropolitan Police for a city of 10 million, and we work mostly in pairs, largely community policing. When I started, I mostly spent my time on foot patrol and wearing those silly hats that tourists love to see, and then I moved more into a sort of response patrol role.
That is so fascinating. I mean, not even carrying a firearm. I mean, here you equate police and a firearm. So when you came over here, was that the first time you've shot or held a gun?
Not the first time I've shot guns. It would certainly be the first time I've had a firearm in a policing context. Obviously, the gun ownership rates in the United Kingdom are significantly different, and guns are restricted by law. And so it means as a police officer, it's very unlikely you're going to come across a firearm. I did come across them in a policing context. slightly different to the United States, but our larger issue is with knives and edged weapons.
Yeah, the 2 months I was in London, I feel like you were never worried, though, as a young woman walking around, because guns weren't a thing and guns weren't a problem. But so at what point were you like, nah, I've had enough, I want to come live in a beach town?
So I live in Charleston, so I live on the peninsula. The biggest difference for me is I wanted some better weather and some more positive American attitude, which was slacking in London. And I realized after visiting here a couple of times that this was the place for me.
So you moved here, you said last year?
Correct, last summer.
And did you have the job before you moved here, or did you move here and then you found the job?
No, I actually, when I first moved here, police officers traditionally exchange patches and things like that when you travel and you're going somewhere interesting. So I exchanged some patches with some police officers here and met a sergeant, a historian who's the public information officer here. And after a few months, I realized of not policing that I missed it. And it's something, an itch that needs to be scratched. And I wrote to him and I said, well, are Isle of Palms recruiting? And he said, yes, throw in an application, see what happens. And here we are a couple of months later.
So how long have you been officially on the force?
I joined last week.
Wow.
So I've got to do some in-classroom training because my certifications don't cross the Atlantic Ocean. And I'll be then off to Colombia to do 8 weeks there and should, in theory, be out and about come the summer.
I mean, in theory, like you said, you've been doing this. May or may not be the exact same rules and the exact same protocols, but you have a background. You're not coming in as a rookie. What has it been like, though, since you moved here? What's been your favorite part about living in Charleston?
I think living in a city that I can walk in America. I walk downtown, I walk everywhere, and the buildings are old enough that I can feel slightly at home. And unlike most regional cities in the US, the food is fantastic.
Yeah, you do really get the history here, and how can you turn down shrimp and grits, right?
Precisely, and my grandmother's obviously from the South, so I'd see her every morning eating her grits and eating her collard greens and things like that. So I'm learning.
So what's been your favorite part of downtown to walk around? Do you do like a loop on the Battery? Do you do a loop and try to find the back alleyways? What's the historical part that draws you in the most?
One of my current hobbies is to go downtown and just sort of follow alleyways and streets and see where I end up, and it really reminds me of London. And also I like kind of being by the water and areas around the marsh, and coming over to Old Village and Mount Pleasant, and also obviously being so close to the beach is such a blessing.
You probably never patrolled the beaches in London. Are you ready for that type of a crazy tourist on the beach here?
I'm used to crazy tourists. I'm not used to crazy tourists on a beach. So some things are the same and some things are very different.
What is the biggest hurdle you think is going to be, or a biggest adjustment, I guess, you're going to have to make here?
I think the biggest challenge is making sure that I come at this as a sort of blank slate. I've done this before, but it's not the same. There are similarities, but it's not identical. And if I come in with any preconceptions or things I think I know how to do, it's probably going to end badly for me. So I'm coming in as if I am a rookie.
You've got an interesting way to talk to people. You can come in and they want to talk to you immediately, probably, because it's, oh, you're not from here. I want to learn all about you. So talk about the mix of the Southern hospitality and just general curiosity that you've experienced.
I think as someone from England, where if someone addresses you in the street, you think they might, have something wrong with them. Whereas here in Charleston, I have to get used to people saying, good morning, hello, how are you? And it not jarring for me. But it's great if you're a police officer. It allows you a way in to both talk to people, communicate with people, and in some circumstances work out what you can do with them.
Is there a difference in how the public views law enforcement in London versus, I know you've only been in an official capacity in a short time, but London versus America and how people view law enforcement?
I think you have to remember that England at the end of the day is the mother and America is the daughter. And although we had our differences and there was a split at some point in history, we have the shared legal traditions and the shared concept of policing by consent, which was invented in London by Sir Robert Peel, and which I've already learnt about with the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. So it's nice to see some things have carried over. But ultimately you have people who support the police and want to make sure that the best way to remove crime is through public cooperation.
You're in for a busy summer. It's crowded here. You're going to have a lot of visitors here as well in the tourist sense. What are you most excited about?
I'll start with what I'm least excited about, which is the insects. I've become a huge attraction for the local mosquito population, and so that's probably what's hurt me the most. What I'm most excited for is, meeting these people that are coming to the Isle of Palms to spend their vacation, to spend their summer, and getting to know a bit more about this area that I'm now calling home.
I feel like I could just, you're so fascinating. This is, I mean, I lived there, like I said, for 2 months. So it's not like I know everything about London, but, you know, even when you were going through, do you find that you still carry a piece of that journalism curiosity with you when you go out on scenes or when you're interviewing witnesses or suspects or whatever the case may be?
Of course, I'm sure as a journalist you realise the most important thing to have is a natural curiosity. And natural curiosity is something that police officers and journalists and some members of the public all have, you know, shared. And so being able to take those skills from reporting and finding stories and just instead finding, you know, clues and things like that, that will help you solve crimes.
Do you know what you're going to be working, what shift you're going to be doing yet, or is it kind of just, let's get through the academy first and see?
I serve at the pleasure of the Chief of Police. And so where he puts me is where I go. I do not do particularly well on night shifts, but as with all things, you have to experience it all.
I don't know, Jason, what do you think? You probably have some good questions too, Jason.
I'm actually good.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess, what do you want people to know about you? You know, you're new to the country, obviously, in the sense of like permanent residency. So what do you want people to know about you? If they see you out on patrol, you know, what do you want people to...
If people see me out on patrol, come and say hello. If you want to learn about what I did in London, if you want to learn about how I'm adjusting to America, I'm more than happy to talk. You know, the biggest difference for me is that in London, we always worked in pairs. And here I'm likely to be working on my own. And so I'm going to be very bored and really lacking in conversation.
So when you told your parents initially, hey, I'm dropping out of university, I'm going to try this journalism thing, and then a couple years later, because of COVID, it's, hey, now I'm going to do not a 180, but I'm going to make another career switch. What has your family's reception been like to you joining the law enforcement sector?
I think many of my family have had sort of unorthodox backgrounds and careers. You know, I have family members who are writers, who are in business, my sister has an organic farm. You know, we are really spread across all possible sectors. And my grandfather, in the early days of the Second World War, before he became a pilot, was a police officer in a British colony in East Africa. My family have been connected to public service for many decades, and so it's really just an extension of that.
You mentioned your grandmother lives in the States. Does anybody else live in the States, or are they kind of spread out?
I've got aunts and uncles and cousins. One of my sisters lives in New Hampshire. My brother is married to someone from Annapolis, Maryland. There is a very significant shared Atlantic bond in my family.
They're all going to be coming to visit you now, though. You've got the nice weather.
I hope so. It's never been easier to get friends to come and visit me than living by the beach in Charleston, South Carolina.
So when do you head up to the academy?
It's all up to bureaucracy's decision. So I'm currently doing some electronic learning. I have my first test today. If I pass those, I'll go and do a cumulative test in Columbia, and then they'll give me a date for the academy, and then it's 8 weeks up there before I come back.
You mentioned there's a lot of shared background, obviously, from the legal side. Are there any major differences, though, other than the firearm component? Are there any other big differences that you've had to navigate?
The most significant difference is the reason the United States exists, which is the Constitution. England does not have a written Constitution. And so having to grapple with, you know, a remarkably important thing, which is the Bill of Rights. And it's the reason the United States and the UK are not the same country anymore. And so being able to deal with those, you know, fundamental things that Americans really value. And those are incredibly important when it comes to policing and interacting with government.
Let's do fun stuff. Let's get you walking around.